Yeah, the story of the barn guy. I like this story. I've shared this in various circles. One of my favorites. Well, there always seems to be one in a crowd, right? It seems one person who just doesn't get it. At least one person in a crowd who's off in their own little world, not really in tune with the surroundings or what's going on. This was the person we hear about in Luke's gospel today. Someone was part of this large crowd following Jesus one day long ago. And Jesus was talking about eternal things. He was teaching about life and where it's truly found when a voice in the crowd calls out, "Tell my brother to give me my inheritance." Others who were there that day were probably feeling a little bit awkward in that moment, like, that's not what we're doing here. That's not why Jesus came. Jesus didn't come to pad our portfolios, but to transform our lives. But for at least one person in the crowd that day, there was this misunderstanding about life and what truly living looks like. At least one person in the crowd, as they listened to Jesus talk about life and the life that God desires for us, that person thought, if only I had more money, more land. If only I had half of what my brother has, then I could really live. That's actually not an uncommon way that people sometimes think. And Jesus knew well the human heart and how easy it is for every one of us to believe that there is security in stockpiling stuff, or to seek peace in portfolios, or to associate worth with wealth. So Jesus told this story about a man who had an abundance in his barns, but who lived an empty life. I like this guy in the story Jesus told. He's a farmer, and anybody who knows me would know I root for the bumper crop. I root for the profit for those farmers. I want to see farmers succeed. Yet, to be honest, most of the local farmers I know are very different from the guy in this story. They work hard for what they have, but they're humble enough and wise enough to know that what they have, any profit they get from a crop, comes not only from their hard work, but also from the one who sold them the seed, and the guys who work at the granary, and the God who gives the land and the soil and the sun and the rain. Most local farmers I know don't retire as wealthy men who sit back and eat and drink and be merry. But in this story that Jesus tells, the farmer gets himself into trouble. His problem is not the wealth, the riches, and the windfall that came his way, but his problem, it seems, is that he drew a whole blueprint for his life and for his riches, drafted a plan for his future, but never consulted the architect of life, the one from whom all blessings flow, the very source of life. It seems he relied on his own understanding. And that, Jesus says to the followers that day, and perhaps to us, it's foolish. The man stored up his treasure, a wealth of grain, but the barns that he thought would hold the key to his life became the place of his demise. I used to read this parable and think it was all about the money. And to some degree, it is about money, but it's really, I think, more a story about life, the life that is truly life. It's largely about knowing the source of all that comes to us and how we decide to use what we have. Like the farmer in the parable Jesus told that day, most every one of us, if we are honest, we also know how to build bigger barns, to work for, to store up things we think will secure our future or bring us or our loved ones a sense of peace. The farmer in the parable never really gets it. The person in the crowd who called out to Jesus that day He didn't get it. Jesus wants us to get it, to understand that we don't truly live until we open up our storehouses. A barn that is built for someday, it rarely gets opened. Jesus said, live a life that's rich toward God. And here, the word the gospel writer uses for life is the Greek word zoe. Zoe is not life that is just getting by. It is not life lived in isolation. It is not life that rushes from task to task, accumulating for ourselves or failing to live because we're busy stockpiling for tomorrow. But Zoe is life that is deeply meaningful, life that pulses with purpose. It's the kind of life that Jesus calls abundant life in John's gospel. That's the kind of life I'd love to live. It's the kind of life you want. It's the kind of life that Jesus came to give. But what if the life Jesus wants to give you is different than the life you've carefully planned for yourself? What if the life Jesus wants us to have can't live in the same barns as the ones we've built for ourselves? The farmer had it all planned out for himself, but he failed to ask God. He failed to include God in those plans. If he would have asked, if he would have listened for God's leading, there's no doubt his abundance, or at least some of it, would have been true currency. There's no doubt his abundance would have moved things. It would have made things happen, life-giving things. If the farmer had consulted God, perhaps that grain, or at least some of it, would have been sent to the granary and made into flour and then into bread. It would have fed people. The doors of those big barns would have been opened if that barn guy would have only asked for wisdom and included God in the plans. He would have known the abundant life that Jesus came to bring. We are people who go to Google for guidance. We ask Siri all kinds of things. But when it comes to the stuff of life, do we ask God? We've heard it said, money can't buy happiness, but I discovered something in my reading and research this week. The truth is, money actually can buy happiness, but here's the kicker: only if it's spent on someone else. There's actually neuroscience that backs this up, and experiences also have shown this to be true. Michael Norton of Harvard Business School offered a TED Talk, How to Buy Happiness, in 2021. And in this talk, he says, if our money is not bringing us happiness, we're not spending it right. In a study that was done with several groups of people in various parts of the world, people were given money to spend, and some had to spend it on themselves, and others had to spend it on other people. And the group who spent it on others actually experienced a chemical release in the brain that made them happier. True story. Aside from neuroscience, experience also shows us this. And we see it happen all the time here at East Hills Moravian Church. Someone gives their money or their time or their talent and skills, and it becomes the currency that makes things happen. It grows really good stuff. Last week, for instance, we asked for money to sponsor a classroom at the school next door, and people were happy and gave generously to the cause, so that not only could we sponsor one classroom, but we are now, within a week, able to sponsor 2 classrooms. And as we communicated that to the PTA, they were overjoyed. And then guess what happened? We got more money, and then somebody called in and said, let's make it 3. So instead of sponsoring 1 class, we are able to sponsor 3. What joy and what abundance. The life and the Zoe that this generates, the thing that pulses with purpose, it didn't stop in the hands of the givers. It didn't stop in the East Hills bank account. It will not stop in the hands of the PTA, but the teachers and the students and the parents will all be blessed by this grain, this raw material, this money that people decided would not remain in their barns for someday. Michael Horton of Harvard Business School would say, if our money is not producing life, we're not using it the right way. And Jesus would say the same thing about our money, about our time, about our talents, whatever it is that we store up in the barns that we have built. It's meant to be enjoyed and shared. The crowds that day who followed Jesus, they followed because they were hungry to rise above the troubles of this world. They were dying to live. And so they followed Jesus wherever he led them. We don't know if the person in the crowd ever really understood the life that Jesus came to give. We don't know if that person ever really got it. The question perhaps for us is, will we? Will we receive and live the life that Jesus wants us to have? Let's pray.